Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is important to retrieval augmented generation, which is the chunking strategies. If you worked with LLM based applications before, you're going to know that the content that the retrieval component comes back with and how it's broken down, because usually your case or your scenario is going to be with a big corpus of data that you need to split into many ways so you can actually assure that it's as effective as possible for your LLM to give you the best answers. So today we'll explain each chunking strategy and then how it impacts your LLM application. So in RAG systems, we heavily depend on the idea that we are pulling data or retrieving data from a knowledge base or an external data store. And we want to make sure that the large language model is getting enough and the most effective piece of information needed for it to answer the questions that you have or to give you a response that is very accurate for your customer or user. And for that to happen, we talked before in a previous video about embeddings and how it catches the semantic meaning. But for you to actually embed the best piece of data that your RAG system is going to maximize on its potential, we need to use the best way to split the content for our applications. So we need to think of what our AI application is doing or LLM application is doing and understand that we maybe cut a chunk that is not too large, because if it's too large, it's going to hold a lot of details, and that could also water down what the large language model can come back with. Or we don't want it to be very short. That means it's not going to be enough context, and the large language model has a higher probability of trying to use its own training data, which is not bad every time, but now we lose the advantage of a RAG system, in other words. So how do we find the best fit or chunking strategy for our LLM application? That's why we're going through the types. So the first chunking strategy, and the easiest one, is the fixed size chunking strategy. In other words, you are saying whatever body of text or content that I have, I'm going to split it into 500 words each, and each one is going to be a chunk that I'm going to be embedding into my vector store, which can serve a purpose in some of the LLM applications out there. When you think about, say, you are building a chatbot that is LLM based for an FAQ, so you can have the question answer combination as one chunk for each one, and most probably they are less than 500 words. Or let's say if you're using it for e-commerce product details, so each product details, most probably you have a common size of attributes, etc. for each product, so that could be a fixed size also. So there's applications for it, but that's like the simplest type. One of the other strategies of chunking is the sliding window chunking, and the idea is it's preserving some window of text that's going to overlap between one chunk and another, and that assures the continuity of context between multiple chunks. The overlapping nature of these chunks makes sure that the context keeps going while you're going from one content piece to another. One example for the sliding window chunking is a customer service bot that you could be helping the customer troubleshoot. So the continuity of the context from the user is important for you to answer the questions properly. So a sliding window chunking mechanism can help because it will always have an overlap of what happened before in the history of that chat or the conversation. Another strategy is the structured chunking, which also depends heavily on your content because you can leverage the inherent nature of the document itself. So its headings, its paragraphs, its sections. So if you have documents that have a certain structure and it's a repetitive pattern in your content, then structural chunking makes sense as a strategy, which will preserve also the contextual integrity of your content. One example for structural chunking is if you have an earnings report, a public earnings report that you want to break down into your RAG system. Now you have certain sections that are well known, and you can break down the chunks into these, whether it's quarterly performance, the revenue breakdown, the future projections. So you have well-known sections that you can actually chunk each one by itself from that document. Then comes semantic chunking, which is another strategy. And this one is a little bit advanced with the idea that if we do the example where there is a book with 20 pages, and those 20 pages are going to be split originally into a certain fixed sized length chunks, in other words, and then all these are uh, put into a vector database with their own embeddings. And then we measure the similarity with a certain threshold between all these chunks till we find out that something is breaking that threshold and it's not as similar anymore. We understand that the context is different. And then whoever those similar chunks are going to be generated into an embedding by itself, while the rest that is far away from it is going to be also embedded by itself. So in other words, it's more work on the LLM and the vector database side to create those embeddings, do the comparison, and once the comparison is done, now you have really good semantic meaning captured, that you understand how chunks differ from each other, or are they in different contexts so they don't have a lot of similarity between each other. And that is an extra step, definitely, but it's worth it if you need more precision and more contextual integrity. So to benefit from chunking in your RAG system, it's best to do three things. One is first to analyze your data and actually see if it has a certain structure in place. Or is it simple as pretty flat text that you can try to test out a certain chunking strategy with? So the second step is going to be choosing one of the chunking strategy to actually start using. And then the third, just keep testing and iterating and see what kind of impact that chunking strategy is making to your application. And maybe there are certain scenarios where you can explore a different strategy. Now, bringing up the whole idea of testing and iterating, also one of the strategies could be to have a hybrid approach of chunking strategies that can be used together to help accomplish the best context for your LLM application. So let's say you have a document where this document has a lot of structure in place that is well known. So a structural chunking mechanism or strategy can help a lot. But at the same time, there is a place where there is community discussions in that document. And it will benefit a lot from semantic chunking, where it will relate in places that the structural chunking is not going to help. So in other words, a hybrid approach could be also the way to go for your LLM application. There's definitely a lot of more of the chunking strategies, and there's also techniques that are being like introduced newly also. So the types that I mentioned are the ones that the most common, and definitely dig more into what makes sense for your LLM application, what helps you accomplish the best context integrity for users and your customers, and make the best benefit. And it's all about testing and iterating. Thank you so much.
For Robbie Innovations.